Hello everyone, today we're going to be learning about one of the linguistic models of speech acquisition. There are many linguistic models of speech acquisition and the focus of this video is the nonlinear phonology. Nonlinear phonology was introduced by Goldsmith and it refers to a collection of theories that focus on the hierarchical nature of the relationships between phonological units. So this approach describes phonological acquisition as separate levels of representation called as tiers, and these are organized hierarchically. It is termed nonlinear because it takes into account all these elements both independently and also in relation to one another, and that speech production involves more than just production of a sequence of phonemes. There are two main tiers of nonlinear phonology, and they are the prosodic tier and the segmental tier. And let's start with the prosodic tier. The prosodic tier focuses on words and the structure of words, and it includes all of these levels. This diagram shows an example of the prosodic tier representation for the word birthday, and you can see that it illustrates the concept of the hierarchical arrangement of varying levels of speech sounds. Now let's learn what each of these tiers represent, starting with the word tier, which simply denotes words. We can take the same example. The word birthday is at the level of the word tier. Following that is the foot tier, which refers to grouping of syllables. And a syllable could be either a strong syllable or a weak syllable. A foot can only contain one strong syllable, but it can also contain other weak syllables. A foot that has a weak syllable can either be strong first, in which case it is called left prominent or trochaic, or weak first and is called right prominent or iambic. In the word birthday, birth is the strong syllable and day is the weak syllable, and together they form a foot. And since the strong syllable comes first, it is a left prominent foot. Following foot tier is the syllable tier. A syllable has one prominent phoneme called the peak, which is usually a vowel, and less prominent phonemes which are generally consonants. In the syllable tier, there is a strong syllable and a weak syllable. In the word birthday, birth is the strong syllable with one vowel known as the peak, and day is the weak syllable with a peak, which is a diphthong in this case. Next is the onset rhyme tier. In a syllable, consonants can appear before or after the peak. Consonants that appear before the vowel are known as onsets, and consonants that appear after the vowel are known as codas. The peak and the coda together make up the rhyme. Syllables without a coda are called open syllables, for example, a consonant-vowel combination. And syllables with a coda are closed syllables, like a consonant-vowel-consonant combination. All languages allow syllables without a coda, and some languages do not allow for closed syllables. And open syllables occur more often than closed syllables across the world's languages. Let us take the strong syllable birth from the word birthday. Here, a is the vowel, and so the consonant before that is the onset, and the rest is the rhyme, because a is the peak and th is the coda, and they form together the rhyme. The same applies to the weak syllable day. Here, d is the onset, and the rest is just the diphthong. And since open syllables are acceptable, it is a peak without a coda and forms the rhyme. The final prosodic tier is the skeletal tier. It includes slot for individual speech sounds and is a way to link the prosodic and segmental levels. In the skeletal tier, all individual phonemes are represented as vowels and consonants. Again, to summarize, in the word tier is the word birthday. It has a strong and weak syllable, making a foot. There is a strong and a weak syllable in the syllable tier, and each syllable splits into an onset and a rhyme. Finally, the skeletal tier is shown where the individual speech sounds are represented as either a vowel or a consonant. Going back, we have discussed that there are two main tiers and we have learned what is prosodic tier, and now we will move on with the segmental tier. In the segmental tier, the features of the individual speech sounds are described according to three notes: the root note, the laryngeal note, and the place note. This hierarchical tree structure is also known as the feature geometry. Here, The root node represents the manner of articulation of speech sound, whether it is sonorant or consonantal, continuant or nasal. And the place node represents the place of articulation, indicating if it is a labial or coronal or a dorsal sound. Finally, the laryngeal node represents voicing, that is, if it is a voiced or a voiceless sound. Now, first, let's see an example of segmental tier features for the consonant. Its root features are consonantal, continuant, and not a sonorant. It is labial but not rounded and is not voiced. And as for the vowel oo, it is labial and rounded, high, back, and anterior, and is also voiced. Underspecification is a concept featured in nonlinear theory. During speech production processing, some feature content is automatically supplied for output because of built in redundancies in the phonological system. These features are also said to be predictable or default. Let me give you an example to understand this better. In English, sonorant implies voicing because all sonorants like nasals, glides, liquids, and vowels in English are voiced. And so, voicing is said to be default or underspecified when producing sonorants. On the other hand, voicing must be specified for stops, fricatives, and affricates because it could be either voiced or voiceless in English. And so, in these stops, fricatives, and affricates, no voicing is considered the default or underspecified feature, and voicing is the non default or specified feature. The same phenomenon is true for place of articulation also. If we go back to the example we've seen earlier, the consonant is a fricative, and so no voicing is the default in this case. And since the consonant is also unvoiced, the voicing was not mentioned in this example. Moving to the concept of underspecification, some feature content is automatically supplied for output because of built in redundancies. That is, the feature voicing is automatically supplied for sonorants because all sonorants are voiced. And so, voicing in this case is unnecessary or redundant to be specified. Moving on to the application of nonlinear theory to typically developing children. There is a link between the segmental and suprasegmental tiers that highlight the interaction between speech sounds and other speech language domains. This also states that development is progressive or additive. That is, children's representations account for a large proportion of younger children's speech production, and that children add to these representations as they mature. Generally, as children develop speech, they begin by producing the underspecified segment element from other tiers and gradually add specified features until the adult phonological system is acquired. Child specific defaults are also hypothesized, with some children preferring labials and other having velas as a default, rather than the universally expected coronal preference, indicating variability in the order of development of place features. The application of this theory to speech language pathology practice involves application in assessment and intervention part. With this theory, Bernhardt and Stemberg developed a theoretical text, a workbook for clinicians, and a computerized assessment and analysis called CAPES, which stands for Computerized Articulation and Phonology Evaluation System. Also, in assessment, attention is paid to production of consonants as well as vowels, syllables, word shapes, and stress patterns. The goals for intervention focus on utilizing already established sounds in new syllable shapes and new sounds in the established syllable shapes.